2021, focusing on the future of our state and local economy. I'm Angie Anderson, President and CEO of the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association. This event is being recorded and translated into Spanish simultaneously. Please be sure to select a language channel by clicking on the globe in the bottom part of your screen and be sure to mute the original audio. Next slide, please. Today's agenda includes this welcome and the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association's annual report, followed by a statewide economic outlook presented by Richard Wobbekind. Then we'll do a deep dive into Glenwood Springs' economy with a moderated panel of local business leaders. We'll conclude the event with an address by Governor Polis. This event will conclude at 4:30 p.m. Next slide, please. A few quick reminders. If time allows, we will address questions. Please enter those questions into the Q&A rather than the chat. If we are not able to get to questions, we will follow up after the event. We are on a pretty quick timeline. In 2 hours, we'll go very fast. Again, one more time, this event is being recorded and translated into Spanish. If you're just joining us, please be sure to select your preferred language channel by clicking on the globe in the bottom part of your screen. Next slide, please. Before we get started, we have several individuals and businesses to thank and acknowledge. I'd like to start by introducing our team, beginning with our board of directors. Eric Brotherson is the chair of the board, Steve Nielsen, vice chair, and Nicole Christensen, treasurer. Next slide, please. And our full board of directors includes Trent Blizzard, Matt Gianeschi, Dean Kinkle, Brianna McCallum, Mike Mercatoris, Charlie Willman, Bill Dieter, Mike Picori, and Christian Henney. Next slide, please. And just like to acknowledge our staff as well, Lisa Langer, Debbie Bannon, Heidi Panko, Joni Bates, Tara Harmon, and Jackie Kaminsky. Thank you so much for the time, talent, and dedication of each one of these individuals, especially over this past year. Next slide, please. Huge thanks to our sponsors, First Bank and the Post-Independent, for making this event possible and open to the entire community. Next slide, please. We'd also like to thank our Chairman Circle investors, Alpine Bank, Bank of Colorado, Colorado Mountain College, Glenwood Caverns Adventure Park, Glenwood Hot Springs Resort, Hotel Colorado, Iron Mountain Hot Springs, Post-Independent, and Valley View. And now we're going to share with you a few highlights from 2020. Claudia, please go ahead and play.
Hi, I'm Eric Brotherson, chair of the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association Board of Directors. On behalf of our staff, our entire board, and the entire business community, I want to thank you for your investment into our organization. On the onset of the COVID-19 crisis, we quickly stepped up and devoted our resources to being a trusted partner and lifeline for local businesses. We have been continually working hard to provide business support and promotion, outreach, timely communication, and advocacy. Utilizing our business and breakfast platform together with our partners, we offered webinars weekly in the beginning of the pandemic as information needed to be shared quickly with local businesses. A partnership with Colorado Mountain College allowed for the launch of CMC's Back to Business program, where businesses could take advantage of informative webinars, trainings, and business coaching at no cost. We creatively encouraged the communities to support local businesses even during the stay-at-home order. Restaurants and community members are still actively engaging on the Dining Dish Facebook group. The tourism department has continued marketing efforts with a focus on safe and sustainable messaging throughout the pandemic and Grizzly Creek Fire. The Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association introduced Glenwood Gold Community Currency as part of the Economic Recovery Strategy, which is a year-round buy local stimulus program. A successful tourism stimulus campaign rewarded visitors who booked qualifying weekday stays with $100 in Glenwood Gold. The campaign served as an additional boon to local businesses when it relaunched following the Grizzly Creek fire and received national and international media attention. Local businesses have also supported the endeavor through their own giveaways, promotions, and gifting programs. We partnered with the City of Glenwood Springs and the DDA to launch a multifaceted Just Around the Corner shop and dine local advertising campaign during the holiday season, encouraging the community to support our local businesses. The partnership also included the Glenwood Springs Wings campaign, encouraging people to creatively move throughout the downtown shopping and dining district. Nearly $300,000 in Get Glenwood Going grants, sourced from the city and DDA funds, were approved to 130 local businesses and nonprofits utilizing the Glenwood Springs Chamber Foundation. Another round of relief was distributed to restaurant relief grants. We partnered with local businesses and organizations, our neighboring Chamber of Commerce, Garfield County Public Health, and municipalities within the county to launch the United to Stop the Spread campaign. Thank you for your support and dedication to our community. We look forward to helping your business thrive now and in the future. Together we are stronger, and we will continue the momentum of making Glenwood Springs the ideal mountain community.
All right, thank you. We can move on to the next slide. So it was quite a year. Thank you so much to so many people, so many businesses, so many organizations. We really look forward to continuing our mission to help your business thrive and our vision of making Glenwood Springs the ideal mountain community. I'm now going to turn it over to Dave Portman, Market President of First Bank, Roaring Fork Valley, who will introduce today's keynote speaker. And again, thank you so much to First Bank for sponsoring this event.
Thank you, Angie, and I'm pleased to be here and grateful that First Bank could play a small role in bringing this event to you today. I really like the theme Onward 2021. It was certainly a challenging year, and it's nice to look forward right now to what's ahead of us. So anyway, I have the privilege of introducing Dr. Richard Wobbekind. Richard is the Associate Dean for Business and Government Relations, Associate Professor of Business Economics and Finance, and Faculty Director of the Business Research Division at the Leeds School of Business at the University of Colorado in Boulder. He participates annually in the Kansas City Federal Reserve Bank Regional Economic Roundtable and is a member of the Governor's Revenue Estimating Advisory Committee. He's frequently interviewed by local and national broadcasts as an expert and has too many awards and recognitions for me to go into in this introduction. Richard's been a Colorado resident for over 40 years and spent much of his time studying both the state and regional economies. And with that, I'd like to turn the floor over to Richard. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great. I very much appreciate being there. I have to be honest, I'd rather be having a meal in one of your great restaurants or having a cold beverage along the waterside there, but this is the world we're living in this year. Some of you know that I typically up there at the Hotel Colorado with the Colorado CCCMA, Colorado City and County Managers Association, every year in the spring, and of course that's been thwarted the last couple of springs. So really looking forward to getting back up to your beautiful community. It was heartwarming at some level to hear what the Chamber has been doing. It's certainly been true in many communities, and there's obviously communities that are tourism based. This has been a heck of a run, as you know. So I want to talk a little bit about that. You know, I'm feeling this. So you just heard a little bit in my intro. I've been involved in the economic outlook forecast of the state. We just did our 56th annual in December. And some of what I'm going to speak about today came out of that forecast in December. But in this environment, you're updating information weekly, and forecasts are updating our forecasts, every month at the very least at this particular point, because so many new things have been happening, and I'll address some of those here quickly. However, as you see here, there's an address there. That's the website of the Business Research Division. We have this booklet and all of our information up there, as well as many products that we do on a quarterly basis, and it's all accessible and free to the public. And the forecast is in its 56th year, but I've been doing this since 1989, so gotten a really good feel for the state over a very long period of time, and delivered a number of these in all corners of the state, and still do, down in Durango, out in Grand Junction, down in the southeast part of the state and the northeast part of the state, and so on. It's we're sitting in the metro region, but we're paying a lot of attention to the broader state economy, and that's one of the unique features about our outlook. We cover all of the geography of the state, and we cover all of the sectors, like leisure and hospitality. You're a very, very important sector in Glenwood. So I use this particular slide back in time, and it always reminds me of your area because of the train tunnels. But what is that light at the end of the tunnel? And I was talking about this back in 2010 and 2011. Is it really a shiny sky, or is it a train coming in the other direction at you? And I want to say today that I'm going to tell you that I'm feeling pretty much that it's the light at the end of the tunnel is the shiny sky at this point. It's not that we couldn't take a step back, and it's not that it's going to happen tomorrow, but a lot of the signs look really good, and we can talk about that. And I'm really planning on taking no more than 30 minutes for the slides, and hopefully leaving at least 15 minutes for Q&A. So I'll step up the pace here as we go along. So starting with a little bit of background, you can't really talk about a Colorado recovery or a Glenwood Springs recovery without sort of thinking about the larger picture of the US economy, how it's going to recover, various sectors, but income levels and so on. And as you know, incredibly steep drop in with the GDP in the second quarter. We saw a little bit in first quarter, and then we saw the nice bounce back in Q3, and then Q4 tempered a little bit, like about a 4% rate in the fourth quarter, wound up down about a little bit about 2.5% year over year. What's happened that's so striking, however, has been the amount of fiscal stimulus that's gone on. I agree with, I'm not going to tell you I agree with all of it, and maybe that's a comment for Q&A as we go down the line. But I am going to say that with this latest stimulus that was passed, it is really likely we'll get to the same level of GDP by the end of the summer. Before we were saying, hopefully we'll be there by the fourth quarter. Now I think we're there by the third quarter. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see GDP grow at well over 6% this year. And if it does, that's going to be the fastest GDP growth rate since 1984. So a really dramatic surge in output. Unfortunately, I can't tell you that we're going to get the full bounce back in employment as rapidly. And this is a point I want to highlight nationally, but we also should be talking about this when we get to the Colorado slides here in a little bit. So you can see this, people were saying, is it going to be a V-shaped recovery? And I'll go back to the previous slide for just 1 second. You kind of can see a V there, even though it doesn't come all the way back. Well, you see the same sort of V with with employment, this incredible drop off in employment when the economy shut down. And then you see sort of this bounce back. The first part bounces back rapidly, but now it looks much more like a check mark recovery, or I've been fond of calling it a swoosh recovery without endorsing a particular shoe brand. But you can get the idea here. The employment part is not coming back as rapidly as the GDP is. So that's the real question. When do we get all of the jobs back? How far out? And I have to say, I'm more optimistic. I was saying 2023. I'm feeling more like it's going to happen in 2022 now. So that's, I mean, it still sounds like a long way off, but given how steep the job loss was, I mean, right now, even with 600,000 plus jobs added in last month, we're still down 9 million. So there's a lot of jobs to make up. And I have to tell you, of the jobs that are lost, still lost, about 40% of them are in leisure and hospitality, the key sector that you've been talking about in the preceding comments. So this is, you know, this is where getting people out, getting the vaccines out, and getting people back into, quote, normal life is really going to help leisure and hospitality, and also another subgroup, which is called arts, entertainment, and recreation. And I know that sounds like gobbledygook, but that's where the river rafters are, and that's where other types of entertainment resides, or when you see, you know, amusement parks or entertainment revenue, all of that is sitting in that arts, entertainment, and recreation group. So you've got a lot of those pieces there. And another part that's been really heavily hit is personal services, and that includes things like gyms. So those areas still are being, you know, significantly affected by the shutdown and now the opening. And as we open the economy back up, you know, I'm hopeful a lot of those businesses are going to come roaring back. So more about that. So again, with the last month's data, we now are down 6.2%. And before last month's data, we were still down a larger percentage of jobs than we ever were in the last recession, the so-called Great Recession. You can see 6.3% on the slide, and now we're at 6.2%. But you can also see what I'm trying to highlight. The last recession took us over 6 years, 6.5 years to recover from, get back to the same employment level. I'm thinking we're looking here at 3 years, or 3.5 years. So much more rapid recovery in terms of the employment. And I think that's good news for all of us. It's good news for the basic economy, but it's certainly good news for the country as a whole. So Colorado, you know, we've taken a hit in this. Some of it is related to the fact that we have a concentration in tourism. There's no question about that. We are a state that relies a percentage of our economy, and certainly geographic areas of the state like yours have a heavy emphasis on tourism. So there's no doubt that we were impacted more severely by that. Hawaii, the most significantly, Nevada, very big impact from tourism, from a loss of tourism jobs. And also California gets a large amount of tourism. So you can sort of see that reflected. Interestingly enough, through January, you can see that Idaho is in positive territory, and our neighbors just to the, very close to the west of you, are in one of the most rapidly recovering economies in the US, Utah is. So we are seeing some bright spots. Colorado winds up, and I'll show you a ranking slide in another maybe 10 minutes or so, but we wind up kind of in the middle. We went from being a top 5, top 8 kind of state, and now we're sort of, at this particular point, we're sort of in the middle. So it's extremely important, and I'm sure the governor is going to talk about all of the plans that he and his cabinet have on how to try to juice these things up a little faster. But it's extremely important that, you know, we get the jobs back in those particular sectors that have been impacted the most. Leisure and hospitality, including that includes restaurants, personal services. And again, I think the vaccine makes an enormous difference in this. So right now at the national level, the unemployment rate has come down to 6.2%. It's a little deceptive, as I'll show you on this next slide, because the unemployment rate is a calculation based on who's in the labor force. And we've had a significant drop off of participation in the labor force this time around. and particularly by females. And of course, you can make some correlations here. I'm sure people are. It is likely more, it's much more likely, like 2 to 1, that a woman is the primary provider in the household in terms of childcare or education during this downturn. So the more females dropped out specifically related to this type of, shutdown economy that we had. And it's going to be interesting to see if we, if and when we get sort of that bounce back. You may have read articles. They're calling this the she session because it has been so much more impactful on women than it has on men in terms of both the daycare provision part of it, but also that a lot of the professions that women are concentrated in are also professions that were hurt, impacted significantly. Personal services, health services, social assistance and health services, hotels, restaurants. So those, a lot of those sectors that are more severely impacted are also overrepresented by female labor force. So this just really quickly shows you the differential sorts of impacts, and I'm happy to share these slides with who you're recording this, but if people want a copy of these slides, I'm happy to share them. But what we see is a very differential impact in this particular downturn in terms of the unemployment impacts based on age, based on ethnicity, based on education, much more dramatic impacts in lower educated people with lower education levels. And a lot of them are in industries that are direct face-to-face kinds of contact industries. And so those have been impacted the most. And you get people who have higher levels of education, and in many cases, they're in industries that are more capable of having work at home types of situations. So what was very interesting about this particular downturn is that we saw these incredible spikes in personal income. So you can go all the way back to April. That was the first stimulus, and you can see the green bar being higher. So we shut the economy down in in March and April, and then we had this incredible growth in personal income due to the increased unemployment benefits from the federal government and due to the tax checks that came in the mail that were targeted to hit us around April 15th last year. You can see in January of this year, this big jump up. That was the stimulus bill passed in December. Checks were sent out, the stimulus checks were sent out in January. And you're going to see a similar effect when we get to March, because we see those checks are going out right now as we speak. So you're going to see a big jump up in personal income. And the reason that's the good part of this is that we have seen a direct correlation between these personal income jumps and retail spending. And in the previous, in April and in January, this jump in retail spending was really diverted, if you will, to a lot of goods purchases because services were sort of clamped down. Back in April, they were totally clamped down. And in January, we saw some additional outbreaks of the virus around the country. Colorado had their sort of uptick in November, December, but we saw it in other places in January. And so when you have that, higher level of shutdown or lower capacity at restaurants and so on, people are spending the money on other things. Yes, they're spending it on groceries, but they're spending it on home improvements and all sorts of other stuff. So what I'm hopeful is that when we see this March payment, people are going to start spending that money on services. And one of those services is going to be tourism. So I think that money is going to get used and could very well be an optimistic note for your part of the world, starting in April, May, June, as people start to get out and do more traveling. I'm hoping that all of that pent up demand is going to show up on your doorstep. So this kind of shows you that we had this big surge up in January with that last stimulus check. We see a drop down in February after that wears off a little bit. but I'm hopeful in March, and I expect in March, you're going to see retail pick up again. And I think that's going to continue to fuel retail sales as we go forward. And again, leisure and hospitality, hotels, restaurants, all of that stuff is in the retail sales category. So I'm specifically addressing the types of structure that you have in your area and what we're hopeful you're going to be seeing. And this is, so that previous slide showed you that nationally we're up about 6%. In Colorado, unfortunately, a lot of the data lags a little bit, but we're seeing year over year, sales tax are up 0.9% in Colorado, based again off of retail sales at the state level. So we can get that at the state level and in aggregate. We can get it for some communities. Some communities tax slightly different than other communities. But what I'm trying to highlight with this is not that you should pay attention to those specific communities, but rather there was a big differential on who took a hit on this and who didn't. The outdoor kinds of malls and the big box places did much better than the people who had inside malls or or smaller concentrations of big boxes. So it very much, city by city, you see great variation when you look at that number. And you can again see January, we're only up 0.9%, but at the very bottom, you can see through December for the calendar year, Colorado was up 2.3%. So moving along, let me just make a quick comment. I do have some concerns about this going forward, more later if we get to Q&A, in terms of, you know, the amount of stimulus we've put into the system, what that might mean in terms of financing the federal debt further down the line. People are always sort of interested in that commentary. So looking lastly at interest rates and prices, let me just comment that the Federal Reserve stepped in this time and said, we will not have a financial recession. And we didn't. We had a financial recession in 2008 and 2009 for a variety of reasons. This, which you could have envisioned, might have turned into a financial collapse. The Fed stabilized all of the different credit markets, including the bond markets. The banks were in much better position going into this. Households were in much better position going into this. And as you well know, housing prices not only didn't collapse, they've been going up. So even if people are in financial distress in terms of losing their job, if they own a house, they probably are not underwater in terms of, in terms of the house is worth less than their mortgage. The house is probably very likely worth a lot more than their mortgage at this point, because we've had this housing price appreciation. Our view, or my view, I guess if you want to say it this way, the Fed just came out today and said they're keeping rates low to 2023, which seemed to buoy the housing market. I think you're going to see the 10-year, which is very important for mortgage loans and so on, trending up to the 2 range by the end of this year and going beyond that in 2022. So you are going to see that. But again, look at that line, which is the middle line, the kind of blackish, greenish, blackish, I'm not sure exactly what the color is, but that middle line, you can see how low that 10-year rate is going all the way back for the past 20 years. So even with this increase, it's still well below anything you've seen. And although we are stressing out about a 3% interest rate on a 30-year mortgage, that is like so incredibly low compared to history, as you can see with the top line, which is in the brownish color. One area of concern for me nationally with some of the policies we're pursuing right now, but we're also seeing continued in Colorado, is a higher inflation rate than the nation. And again, I'll leave that and come back to that in Q&A. I want to stay on schedule here. So moving to Colorado with some commentary. First and foremost, as I mentioned, we moved from being a top 5 to 10 state. Now we're sort of in the middle for a lot of things in terms of our 1 year. Our employment growth is 27th, meaning we, in this case, employment loss is the 27th in the country. So right around the middle. Our population growth, again, has remained in the top 10. We've seen a slowing in personal income growth. We've seen a slowing in wage growth. And certainly our unemployment rate is, although with the revisions that came out earlier this week on Monday, they fortunately brought down the December number dramatically, but we're still at a rate that's it's 35th lowest in the U.S. So it's above average for the country, or well, it's 35th lowest. So I shouldn't say it's above average. It's below average for the country, and it's below average for the national number. It's below the national number as well, in terms of the national number is a lower number than the Colorado unemployment rate is at this point in time. We'll see when the February number comes out. It's coming out in another week or so. We think the reopening of the economy in Colorado will really juice the numbers a little bit in the next couple of months. So we're hopeful about that. We have seen a slowing in population. This is growth. This is coming from the state demographer's office. Some of that is being driven by just lower migration related to COVID. Some of it's being driven by lower population growth in the country as a whole. Why is that happening? Well, there's sort of three pieces of that, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. Number one, the birth rate has slowed down during the coronavirus. It was already slowing, but it slowed even more. The death rate clearly has increased with the coronavirus. And then we've had a much slower rate of international in-migration to the country as a whole. So the number for the population growth for the country that came out in December was 0.35%. That's the lowest it's been in decades. So we had very slow population growth in the country. Colorado's also slowed, although we're still well above the national rate, well above 2 times the national rate for population growth. So this was our forecast we came out with, and we usually don't have this incredibly big barbell on the forecast number, but we were facing so many uncertainties, we felt like we had to. So that's the range. And then when all of the bad employment numbers came out for Colorado in December, and for the November number and the December number, which were released after we released the forecast, the press were all calling us saying, that number is probably too high, that 40,000 is too high. And we said, no, we want to stay with it, because when we do reopen, we think we're going to see a pretty nice surge. And right now we're still staying very much with the 40,000 number or even above. And I will highlight the number that's on there for 2020 with the data revision that came out. It's almost exactly right. The state lost about close to 150,000 jobs in 2020. So it was a huge impact on the state. Our forecast shows a recovery in almost all areas except information and government. We'll see whether or not that holds. I should tell you that information includes things like movie theaters are in there, and that's part of the reason it's taken such a large hit, and it's been struggling, that sector. And then government has really been state and local government job loss. So that's another area that we're still concerned about in terms of state and local government finance, although many areas, as I showed you earlier, have held up really nicely. So you're not in an MSA, but I thought I would just sort of highlight that. This is the entire set of metropolitan statistical areas for the United States. So this shows you, the best at the left-hand side and the worst at the right-hand side. And you can see in there, places like Greeley and Boulder that were up in the top quarter for year after year after year. And these employment growth numbers are now down in the bottom third of the country. And even the best growth or least job loss that we had, the Colorado Springs MSA, is not in the top quarter. So it just shows you the state, struggling a little bit more. One area that's been a concern is the unemployment claims. You can see to the far left part of each of these graphics what the number was going into this, and you can see what the number is now. And so, going into this at 2000, and now we're up at, we're still up at a multiple of 4 or 5 of what we were going into this. And this data is, within a week or two. So we do have a lot of unemployment to deal with at the state level. We certainly, as you know, have a lot of unemployment to deal with at the national level. And that's the one piece, both at the state and the nation, that's been stayed stubbornly high, even as the economy's been reopening. This is just provided for you. You can see the counties on the Eastern Plains have the lowest unemployment rates. Some of the counties most dependent on tourism have some of the highest unemployment rates in the state. And this is based again on the January data that just came out on Monday of this week. There'll be new data for February coming up again in about 2 weeks from now. So this is January year over year, which areas have gained jobs and which areas have lost jobs. And on the left-hand graphic, it's the percentage of job loss. And on the right-hand graphic, it's the number of jobs. So you can see at the very, very bottom, the largest category is accommodations and food services. It's still down at this point, January over January, we're down about 65%, and that's restaurants. And then a couple up from there is that arts, entertainment, and recreation category, performing arts, outdoor activities, as I mentioned, the river rafting and all of those types of things are in the arts, entertainment, and recreation category. So you can see particularly, and then overall government, local government, and then healthcare and social assistance. So we've seen some of these categories clearly take a disproportionate hit, and hopefully significant bounce back in the days ahead. So moving along here, one of the things, and I'm sure you're aware of this, but it is, they've sometimes called this the K-shaped recovery because it has disproportionately hit low-income workers and middle income, and ours is based on industries. There's some other things out there at the national level that are based specifically on job categories, but the lowest income industries have the largest job loss. The middle income industries have, again, regained a chunk of the jobs, but are still down. But the high income industries are almost at the same level they were at going into this. So it's really impacted low income workers much more significantly. A couple of comments on the construction industry. It's an important industry for the state, so I'll just mention this. You can see 1 year home price appreciation. And what we see in this is that the lowest cost of living areas have had dramatic increases. If you were to look left of Pueblo at all of those bars from around the country, you would see very high amenity areas that, generally speaking, have relatively lower costs of living, have had these dramatic surge in prices, like Winter Haven, Florida, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and places that are affordable, and again, places people could go with remote work. So we saw that kind of piece out there. So overall, Colorado value of construction actually held up pretty well in 2020. And we only have 1 month of 2021, but construction is still doing well, relatively well. And that's being based off of increases in residential. As you're probably well aware, the residential sector, with housing prices increasing, has done extremely well. A couple of last comments on relative things for your area. Again, I'm paying a lot of attention to the time, and I want to leave time for Q&A and be respectful of everybody's time. So right now, DIA through December is down 45%. It's important for tourism in Colorado, and you're probably well aware of this. You get lots of people who come through on summer tourism, but you also get lots of people who fly into the airport or go to conventions or business travel and extend to other parts of Colorado. We know that's an important part of broader Colorado tourism. And while this number looks bad, we're the third busiest airport in the United States right now. And the volumes of traffic over the past week have jumped dramatically. So we're really seeing nationally and in Colorado, a big pickup in volume in terms of air travel, which should be a big pickup in terms of overall tourism in the country. What isn't coming back very quickly, and we don't expect it to, business travel is going to be slower to come back, but international travel is going to be slower to come back. So we can talk about that again in Q&A. Visits to public lands, of course, this was a bonanza for last year, and you saw people from all over the state and all over the country in their Winnebagos and we or their tents, and we see this this trend continuing in 2021. Again, good for tourism in Colorado. Snow sports, I won't spend too much time on this. You do have local ski areas, obviously quite close by, but overall, this is an area that's still been impacted, again, because of the restrictions of how many people could be up there. We don't have reports on all the different places. You probably know more about this topic, or people in the room do, on the Zoom do, than I do. But we did see the Vail numbers came in at down 26%. They announced publicly last week. So again, this is another area where we're waiting for full recovery and full volume. So this shows you how much the losses were in leisure and hospitality, going back to that sector, including hotels, restaurants, bars, performing arts, spectator sports, casinos. And you can see the job loss, and it was it was getting smaller and smaller. This is the monthly job loss. And then in November and December, when we had more shutdowns again, it picked up. And now we saw a little bit of a bounce back in the January numbers, but still our overall employment in that area still struggling, and the area we expect to see the largest bounce back by far in 2021. A couple of last indicators and closing here in the last 2 minutes. One thing that people keep asking is, well, how many businesses are we losing? And I think a lot of this may have to do with PPP, but we actually saw a decline in Colorado bankruptcy through the end of December. We have the year-end numbers at this point, and we didn't see any big jump up in terms of bankruptcy filings. We'll see if that changes. Just today, very well-known retail business on the downtown Boulder Mall, Art and Craft Mart, that's been there for 50 years. They just closed today. They announced they were closing. And they said they went through the PPP money, and they just don't see the volume coming back fast enough. So it's interesting, but we'll see if we see this change direction in the months ahead. Still, as I mentioned to you, with housing prices increasing, we saw really no real impacts in housing at all from this downturn in terms of filings or overall sales, foreclosure sales. In fact, just the opposite, because of some of the forbearance and other things that went on. We, along with the Secretary of State's office, we use their data and track new entity filings, which seem to really track future health of the overall economy. And these numbers have been very high in recent quarters. We're feeling good about that we have this sort of entrepreneurial surge going on. So that's one of the things we're keeping our eye on. And I already showed you this. I'm not going to go back through it again, the rank amongst other states in the overall picture. We do a confidence index. Some of you participate in that, and thank you. And others who might like to, business owners, it would be great to have you. It's a very, very easy thing to do. We do this quarterly, and when we released in the beginning of January, the expectations from our Colorado-wide business audience was that first quarter was going to be tough and second quarter was going to be much better. And I think they were spot on 6 months out. We'll be releasing our new one on April 1st, first day of the next quarter. And I'm anticipating a pretty nice jump up in terms of expectations about growth at both the national, but especially the state level. So I'll leave this slide up as a closing slide. I do want to stop and leave time for Q&A, but we continue to have this uncertainty about the forecast because we have a bunch of things in that red circle that are headwinds to our forecast, a bunch of things in the middle that we don't know how they're going to work out this year. So they're true unknowns to us. And then you do have a lot of positive things in the right hand, which I've been trying to emphasize as I went through. The stimulus and the vaccines and so on have been very, very positive. But you know this better than anybody. The middle one, I have drought and fires in there. I mean, those are things that can be very devastating when they happen and very difficult to work through. We're hopeful that those things go in the right direction. Certainly the snow in the month of the very end of February and certainly in March has been promising, at least for the water piece of that picture. So I am closing and I can go back to not sharing my screen. But if people have any questions, I would love to take some questions.
Thank you so much, Richard. If anybody has questions, you would just type them in the chat. We'll address them.
I like to say I was so thorough, but I know that's not true. So,
anybody on the panel have questions? You could just unmute yourself too.
Richard, it's Steve Nilsson. Thanks for the presentation. I'd be curious what your feelings are on the inflationary effects that we're going to see. You know, the Fed is saying that they're going to keep an eye on that, but there's so much money coming into our economy right now, which is good in some fashion, but maybe has caused a concern about how that's going to look in terms of inflation. I wonder if you could address that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was kind of alluding to that. I think people put me in the category of more of a inflation hawk. And I mean, the Fed has put so much money into the system. Taking it back out is going to be an interesting task, which means basically they have to sell down their balance sheet, that slide I showed you, and start to withdraw, put those securities back out there and take the money back out of the system. The money supply increase has been going up 30, 40%. I mean, just crazy numbers. So a combination of that short term plus supply chain disruptions globally. I mean, I didn't go into the global economy, but the vaccine's not rolling out as fast in other parts of the world, and is certainly not in the emerging economies part of the world. So the US is going to be one of the true leaders in terms of getting the vaccine out, which is great for us, but ultimately, some of these other countries in the world rely on tourism and other things, and if they're not getting their economies back online, or their suppliers, for us. So we need to, at the end of the day, those supply chain disruptions, which are still out there, they're going to be out there all the way through, I think, the holiday season. And a lot of the stuff comes into the country that we buy in November and December and so on. So that gives me a little bit of pause, and I'm thinking we're going to see inflation over 2%. Consumer price index is going to go over 2%. I don't think the Fed's going to react, because they keep telling us they're not going to react. They're going to wait for it to stay up for a lot longer period of time. But I do think you're going to see higher prices there. And then my other concern, and people could scoff at this, but it's where's the money going? Well, everybody I know who's high income, who's getting these tax cuts or tax checks, they're buying stocks and they're buying real estate. They're not buying consumer goods. So, we're bidding up assets. I'm not going to tell you I think the stock market's overvalued or real estate's dramatically overvalued. I don't think they're dramatically overvalued, but to me, that's a non-productive piece. I don't know the specifics of your area, but almost every community I go and speak in Colorado has an affordable housing group because housing prices are going up so much and the wages aren't matching the housing prices. And I get that. And frankly, you can see that all over the country. So, to me, the extra money, I would have cut off the payments, and I know I'm offending probably half the people at least on this call. I would have cut off the payments at a much lower level. We know that these people are not spending on consumer goods. People who are unemployed, okay, maybe the unemployment payment's a little too high, the extra unemployment, but okay, they're unemployed. People in the low income bracket, they're struggling. Even some people in the middle income bracket struggling. But we're giving money to people who have never lost their jobs, and now we're handing them a third check. Do we really need to do that? Okay, I'll get off my soapbox.
Thank you. Now we have a lot of questions. Do the unemployment numbers include fraud claims?
So that's a great question, and thank you for asking, whoever asked that question. They had a lot of trouble with that. And I don't know about you, but I've been twice. I had a filing way back in April, and I just had another filing in December under my Social Security number into the system. So they clearly are going in more recently, and especially since they opened up the new system. The state has gotten much better at tracking that, and they've gone back retroactively and pulled those claims out. But I still think that one big spike, they may not have gotten all the claims. So it is an issue. It's an issue nationally and in Colorado, but it's a much smaller issue than it was before. That said, for those of you not following this, we're getting hacked from Nigeria and all these other parts of the world. It just shows you the vulnerability of computer systems and so on. And I had my, I'm looking at the time. I want to make sure I answer the other questions. I had my credit card was hacked and stolen with the Equifax or whatever. And I wound up getting a delivery from Saks Fifth Avenue of a diamond necklace on my doorstep that someone picked up and took off the doorstep before the person just left it there. So they had a whole scheme in place. This was like 4 years ago, and now it's out there. So credit cards was canceled, but they still have all the other data that went with it. Okay, next.
There's a question, what are the energy job losses on the Western Slope? Are you able to speak to that?
I can't speak specifically to that. The energy job losses, so year over year, we are down in the number of energy jobs. We have fewer energy jobs than we had January a year ago. That's one sector that we're not seeing bounce back. Overall, the state has recovered about 56% of the jobs that were lost in March and April. And a couple of sectors are over 100%, have like finance, insurance, and real estate. There's more people working there than there were going into this thing. But natural resources and mining, which is the energy sector, is below where it was going into this. We haven't seen the job recovery, and that has been for both northern Colorado and the Western Slope. I didn't know that I'd get this specific question because I usually do tease this out for the folks out in Grand Junction when I speak out there. The percentage of jobs in Rifle and so on and all the way out through Mesa County is much smaller in that sector than it's totally dominated, frankly, by Weld County right now, just because of where the energy is produced in the state. So we have some hopes that with higher oil prices and maybe some stabilization in natural gas prices, that we won't see any additional losses, but we don't know when it's going to come back.
Okay, maybe time for just a couple more. Do you anticipate a significant impact long-term due to the low birth rate tied to the business and workforce, or do you think this is possibly just a blip?
So, you know, this has been the trend, and we're an aging country, and you know, we've got, I think, 2 more years and then every baby boomer is going to be over 65. You know, we're at the end of this sort of baby boom piece. I don't think it's going to be a long-term trend. I think some people were, you know, careful with not knowing the health impacts and you know, what might, you know, it's totally understandable. Whether people like this statement or not, we have relied on international immigration in all the different sectors, everything from agriculture and tourism to high tech, and slowing all of that migration down for a period of time has also, you know, had this impact on the national growth rates. How that gets changed appropriately, I think, is a really big policy issue and a very important policy issue, because we do have industries that are heavily impacted when we don't have that migration. But, you know, I think we want that migration to be legal migration. So, you know, it's a big issue. Okay, time for one more.
Thank you. Yeah, let's do one more. Do you see migration from urban areas to rural mountain areas being a new normal?
So that's the $64,000 question. I didn't put the slide in here. The state demographer's office is showing continued slow population growth in the rural areas and continued higher population growth along the Front Range. This is just for Colorado I'm talking about. And we're not sure. The people, you know, I just spent some time with the folks in Chaffee County a couple of weeks ago, and they're seeing, you know, a relatively big boom in people from the Front Range that are working remotely in their area. And we hear that in many parts of Steamboat. I spent time with the people up in the Steamboat Chamber, and we're hearing that from a lot of different people. But we don't know what businesses are going to do. I took the slide out of here, but at the end of the day, are businesses really going to let all of these people work remotely forever? Or are they going to say, hey, you've got to come back and be here, you know, 3 days a week or 4 days a week or whatever that might be? And so I think it's a big question, because if these people obviously could afford to rent and in many cases buy, like if we look at you know, Dillon and Silverthorne area and so on, there's an incredible surge in real estate prices in a lot of the beautiful mountain communities that we have in the state, including yours. Well, this incredible surge in prices, if people are buying them as second homes, at the end of the day, I'm not sure that's great for the local economies, to be blunt. If people are buying them as first homes, I think it could be really great for the local economy. So I didn't answer the question. I apologize. I did the best I could do.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Richard. It's
My
always
pleasure.
to have you here. We wish you were here in person. Please come visit us soon, and thank you so much. We're gonna.
I may be there in June. I'm hopeful.
We'd love to have you. All right, thank you. We are now going to move on to our deep dive discussion. We have a panel of local business leaders here representing various sectors within the community. And I am now going to introduce Mike Mercatoris, the founder of Slifer Smith in Frampton, a commercial and entrepreneurial real estate and local restaurant entrepreneur. He does a lot of different things. Also a member of the Glenwood Springs Chamber Board of Directors. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike, and let's have a deep dive discussion on what's happening in our community.
Thanks, Angie, and thank you, Richard. That was incredibly informative. My head is spinning with data right now. I don't know about the rest of you guys. So thank you again for having us and letting us be able to have this panel discussion. I'm really looking forward to diving into this with you guys. A little bit, just real quick, like Angie said, I'm the founder of Slifer Smith & Frampton Commercial and Entrepreneurial Real Estate. And we actually work with entrepreneurs on all sides of the commercial real estate business, whether it's landlords, looking for tenants looking for space, et cetera, et cetera. We really just we're working with all sides and helping out support our local entrepreneurs. I'm also a restaurant guy. I had Zhang Asian Bistro, Grind, Riviera Supper Club, and consulted on a lot of our favorites here in town. So I'm wearing a couple different hats here. I wanted to go ahead and basically, guys, if this is okay, I kind of want to go around the Zoom room, which is going to be my screen here, and I'll pick on you each the way we go around the room. But we're going to do it in two parts. And the first question is going to be about give us a little bit of who you are, what you do, what your business is, and then give us a quick synopsis of what your biggest challenge was with COVID. What ended up being the biggest pivot that you had over the last year within your business. And then in round two, I really want to dig into, I want to hear about the silver linings. I want to hear about the positive changes that you've seen out of COVID in your business, and you made a pivot that's going to stick with you as you're moving forward. And within that, if you can kind of give us a little summary on how you feel the economy is going to be here in Glenwood moving forward through 2021. So everybody ready? All right. I'm starting on my left, Mr. Dave Portman. Go ahead and introduce yourself and give us your challenges the last year.
Thanks, Mike. So yeah, my name's Dave Portman. I am the market president here in the Roaring Fork Valley for First Bank. We have branches in Glenwood Springs now going on just over 8 years, Carbondale, Aspen, and coming soon in Basalt. So excited to be a just full service local community bank in the Valley. So as far as disruptions during the COVID impact, let's start with this. As many of you know, banks were deemed essential services. So we weren't forced to close, but especially in April and May, right, but coming out of the pandemic, we operated very differently. So it might have been drive up only. It might have been lobby access by appointments, might have been educating and you to pushing our customers to utilize digital banking, online and mobile banking. So it was staff management, health and safety. How many people do we have in our locations? What are our benefits and leave programs to make sure we're motivating around public health orders and things like that? So I'd say the whole business model just changed in the fall, and the way we were there for our customers, as many of you could probably attest to more than me. When everything around us is uncertain, certainty in the banking world and financial certainty, your partners in your businesses and personal finances, certainty and stability there is important. And so that was our goal, to kind of make that uncertainty as certain and stable as possible in this one little space of everything we were trying to navigate. So I'd say, Mike, that was probably our biggest disruption. Do you want me to go into number two or work around the?
No, we'll work around.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Obviously, a big part of banking is a lot of face-to-face, and you couldn't do that anymore. So, I imagine that was tough. Lisa, let's talk tourism.
Oh boy, so Richard already outlined a lot of that, didn't he?
Yeah. But what did we see here in Glenwood? We had the advantage. I mean, I wouldn't say advantage, but a lot of people wanted to come visit us. We had people from a lot of drive-in traffic. We saw all kinds of out-of-state plates this past summer. I can attest to that.
Well, let me introduce myself. Lisa Langer. I'm the Director of Tourism Promotion for Visit Glenwood Springs, and that's the tourism department for the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association. And travel, obviously, around the world took a huge hit during the pandemic. We had mandates such as the mask ordinance that went into effect one of the first in the state before the state actually mandated it statewide. We had a mandate to close all of our lodges for the entire month of April. And that dropped our accommodations tax receipts by over 90%. So when you have a budget that relies on accommodations tax receipts like mine, that's a huge hit. And so overall, year over year, we dropped in accommodations tax receipts by 30%, over 30%. So we took a bigger hit, obviously, in the accommodations and the restaurants and the attractions than, you know, other sectors of the economy here in Glenwood Springs. One of the things, though, that we can look at in terms of why we didn't come back as quickly is because, you know, with all the restrictions, our attractions were also closed. Mm-hmm. So we're a three-legged stool, as everyone kept saying. You know, if we don't have restaurants open, we don't have accommodations open, and we don't have attractions open. You can open the hotels, but what are people coming for? So they can't dine in, and they can't go to an attraction. So until mid-June, when those attractions opened and we started having expanded outdoor dining and things like that started opening up, we were still really lagging. However, we did not lag as badly as many of the other locations, tourist locations in the state. So we did fare better than overall than the whole state. And as you said, Mike, we got a lot of out-of-state customers, even with mask ordinances and things. Some of these states that didn't have their masks ordinances ahead of ours were kind of griping at us to start with, but then they got over it, and we do have a lot of outdoor amenities, so we were able to recoup and get back up to speed before the fire hit. And I'll talk about silver linings in the next round.
Right. I thought it was interesting in Richard's in the center section where he was going, you know, drought, fire, etc. Kind of like check. You know? Right. Yeah. So, it was overall. How did the season compare to last season, tourist wise? I mean, were the numbers about the same? Once we got, summer's our busiest month, but once we kind of hit our stride in June, did you feel like the people were coming?
Oh, we were ramping up. We were really optimistic. And then mid-August, when I-70 closed for 2 weeks, right, we realized what a lifeline that is for the community. And, you know, having a fire in your canyon doesn't help matters at all. Yeah. So we started ramping up because of our summer stimulus package that, you know, was highlighted in the video. We did the Glenwood Gold Summer Stimulus. We brought in, we gave $100 in Glenwood Gold to people who stayed at least 2 nights and checked in a Sunday through Thursday. So, you know, that actually brought us back. And after the fire, when we shot that out and it made national and international news, mm-hmm, we were able to actually be in the plus. We were up almost 8% in October. And that's because of that summer stimulus. So yay, it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. Shiloh Bartlett, you're next up on the chopping block, I guess.
Fabulous.
Yeah, Shiloh's here with Slifer Smith & Frampton. She's our real estate expert in the area. So Shiloh, introduce yourself and give us a little synopsis.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Shiloh Bartlett. I'm with Slifer Smith & Frampton. I actually work with Mike in the commercial division in our company. I do both residential and commercial, but the specialty obviously is commercial real estate leasing, tenant-landlord relationships. So yeah, I've been working with Mike for I don't know how long now, but it has been a fascinating year for sure. Our industry has been one that has had a very unique trend. As you guys know through the slides, you know, real estate has not taken a dip in the sense that we haven't, you know, seen the downtrend that the national employee stats have seen. What we've seen actually is an increase in business consistently across the board. Interestingly enough, it sounds like, same with tourism, right? There was a brief blip where people couldn't go anywhere. And our industry, I think, had to pivot very quickly because real estate in general is a very personable, face-to-face industry. And so when you can't meet, you have to pivot directly to, again, your digital, as Dave was saying, right? It's masks, it's gloves, we learned how to do, photo digital tours of every property very quickly so that you can send them to people. So people can then, which they did, purchase sight unseen. They would literally see the video and then purchase real estate that way. So it's been an interesting ride for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's obviously more development coming into Glenwood, always a tough squeeze with, affordable housing. So yeah, it's been interesting, to watch in the real estate industry. And on the commercial side, it's, making sure tenants are able to, pay their rent and helping landlords find, new tenants, making sure everyone's stable to get through that initial push. So thank you for that. George, I'm excited to hear from you. This is something, you manage a lot of different offices, you manage a lot of different people, with doctors in the medical field, you guys are face to face, so give us a little quick rundown on what happened in your industry there.
Sure. So first of all, George Tronto, I'm the Chief of Physician Operations, and basically that means I work with all of our physicians and PAs, nurse practitioner, nurse midwives, which we have over 100, about 80 physicians and 25, 30 midwives. My old count was off. We've grown in the last few years. But, our mission is to care for patients one at a time. And boy, did we do that during the pandemic. We actually have over 1,000 employees. That equates to about 840 full-time equivalents. And we did a huge pivot. Our pride is in many of our primary care network, which is exceptional, along with our heart center, cancer center, orthopedics and spine. That's what really kind of sets us apart. But boy, we really, I think, hit it out of the park during COVID. And that's because really our mission was to protect patients, protect our staff, and keep the doors open. There's many things that we did daily from the very beginning of the pandemic. We set up a whole incident command similar to what the city would set up for the fires. But we ran it we're still on it. We've been running it for more than a year. So our mission completely morphed from take care of all the patients who are sick, but now we have to do things like set up tents in parking lots and test patients for COVID, try to protect the inside of the institution so that patients who did have COVID but weren't diagnosed didn't walk in and infect anybody.
Yeah.
It was a major hit to our inpatient care. Our daily census plummeted. In April and May, we really cut down on all but emergency surgery. So there was a huge financial impact, resulting in that by May, June, we actually had laid off 100 employees. So imagine letting 10% of your workforce go because we could see that the pandemic was going to have a major impact. But by the way, we need to now make sure that we can set up testing centers, that we can make sure that everyone is protected. Our medical staff is incredible. They actually ran strike teams. If a nursing home had a positive COVID test, we would go in the middle of the night, literally, to a nursing home, bring our lab staff, bring physicians and nurses, test those entire nursing homes, segregate the patients who turn up a positive within hours, and then make sure that we've helped them with their protective gear to make sure that they don't continue those infections. Those are pretty major shift in what we did. And now we've shifted, now that we've been able to vaccinate the people that are 70 and over, who were really in our intensive care unit, which we call a critical care unit here. Now that they're vaccinated, our numbers have plunged. So now we're a victim of our own success in that we don't have the inpatients because COVID numbers are down. And now our gears have shifted to vaccinations. By the end of this week, we'll be close to 16,000 immunizations given at Valley View Hospital. We started, yeah. And it's our nursing staff and administrative staff who have worked tirelessly. And we've been keeping track, and our incident command vaccine testing is about a $2 million price tag so far.
Wow.
So that's on top of doing the other, day to day.
Yeah.
So those are some of the highlights.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. You were the front and center, front line. You guys had to figure it out first. I mean, before all of us, we kind of go, okay, what's going to happen next? You were right there going, this is happening now.
Right. And many times, I'll tell you what, we were doing incident command twice a day for months. And so we'd have these meetings and say, what are we going to do to protect nursing homes? And before that became a thing, our physicians identified, because many of them are medical directors at those nursing homes, that there are the people at risk. So let's make sure that we put a big, wrap a big bag around them and try to keep them in a bubble and keep them safe. In most cases,
you didn't actually do that, did you?
Yeah. If we had enough plastic, we would have. Our physicians were always in contact with them, helping them with their policies and procedures, with their PPE. Many times they didn't have masks, and we would say, let's ship some of our supplies to them. And what we found is that in general, when they had an exposure, it came from nurses coming in who may be working at multiple nursing homes. It's not family members. They had done a good job at locking down the family members, but it was staff coming in and out. So it's been a very interesting year. And I think everyone feels really proud of the contribution that they've made to keeping people safe. We did not have many people die, or even people we transferred. We learned really early on, our physicians did, that you don't put people on ventilators. You do a high flow oxygen. And we actually have some physicians who came up and invented their own high flow devices because we didn't have many of the devices that you normally would be able to buy. They made them.
Wow.
And they used those, and they saved many people from having to be in a ventilator.
Wow.
So really proud of what's been accomplished.
Well, we're thankful you guys are there and still there and doing your thing. So thank you so much. Mr. Steve Nielsen, let's talk cars.
I can do that. Good afternoon. I'm Steve Nielsen. I'm with Glenwood Springs Ford, general manager here. I've been here since about 1986. So been in the Valley for quite some time now, and have been able to watch it grow and experience some of that. In terms of disruptions, when this whole thing started, for us, similar to the real estate industry, we're a person-to-person business and always have been. Yeah. And so in April, when we were having to close our showroom for a month, we had to make some changes pretty rapidly. We've always had the ability to do online sales and be able to take vehicles to people's homes or places of business and work deals through the internet, but I don't know that was ever our focus. And so during that month, we had to really start concentrating on that. And I think in the long run, that'll be a good thing for us, because we're seeing some shifts now as a result of COVID to people purchasing online and doing those type of things. The other real challenge I think that we ran into was inventory. The factories closed down for 60 days. And to put that in perspective, the F-150 factories for Ford, they produce an F-150 every minute of every day.
Really?
And those go out across the country, and there are 2 of those factories. And so when they're working 3 shifts, you can imagine the volume that creates. And that's what we held on our lots to be able to sell. And so in the midst of that pandemic, when the factory shut down, all of a sudden our inventories shrunk very rapidly. We went from from my high in February. By the time, after a few months, we were down to about 25% of what our inventory was. So much to the point where people would come in and say, "Are you guys going out of business?"
Oh,
Because there was nothing on the lot. So we had to learn how to sell on the come, so to speak. We had to retrain our consumers to order vehicles and wait for them to come in rather than us stocking them and selling them as they came in, which was an interesting model for us to get into. And fortunately, though, what we noticed is May, we were able to open back up. Our service department stayed open the whole time. It was considered essential the entire time. So we kept that running. And then once, closed in April, May opens back up, we noticed a lot of people coming back in. And I think they were excited to be able to come see us again. So that was good. But those were some of the challenges that we were faced with, Mike.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, they're coming from all angles, like you said, when all of a sudden you can't get the inventory and you don't have the stuff to sell, that gets a little scary. Mark Gould, how you doing?
Good afternoon. Thanks for inviting me. I'm sure you think that I have nothing but cheery things to say about what happened in 2020 based on all the charts.
Honestly, in thinking about it and thinking about what the type of construction you guys do, you also have that city, state, county, the sales tax revenue. So when we were looking at a drop in sales tax revenue, a lot of the work you guys do is infrastructure. So yeah, give us a little update on who you are, what you do, and what happened.
Yeah, and again, thanks for having me. So Mark Gould Jr., third generation Gould Construction, and so this is our 42nd year in business here in Glenwood Springs, and 2020 was definitely interesting. So we were down about 40% in top line revenue. And most of that is due to kind of the scale of work that we do. So companies that were similar to what we do with infrastructure, large scale commercial site work, hotel type facility work, those projects were few and far between during 2020. A lot of it due to cautionary measures from our local government, state, county, and municipal, and as well as outside investors determining where they were going to spend their money. Fortunately, they did decide to spend some money, they being the outside investors that saw the need that people were having and wanting to be in our awesome place that we live. And so, those large scale residential projects started coming back online, but that's one piece to the puzzle, right? Mm-hmm. So other things that we saw were definitely lead time items with supply chain problems. We saw, we bid 300% more projects than typical. And that wasn't because there was more projects that were out there. It was because rather than picking and choosing what we wanted to bid on, we bid everything. So typically we try to not look at anything less than a $500,000 contract. We, honest to God, bid a job for the city of Glenwood for $27,000.
Right.
So it was right. I mean, it was a grind. So, office staff and estimating was super busy. A lot of that doing remote just to try to keep everybody safe. And the teamwork that it takes to put an estimate together remotely was trying at times. But we ran into issues just from, keeping people safe in the field. Obviously, you don't get a lot of construction done with one person. So ours is definitely a people business for sure, with lots of staff in the field trying to work together, yet apart, yet with masks and safe, and it's 100 degrees outside, and you can imagine all the other variables. But, we had issues just even with getting some of our staff to work that relied previously on carpooling and or company provided transportation. So that was a challenge. And there just was times that we didn't know whether we could bid that particular contract because we didn't know whether we could perform that particular contract. Just that uncertainty of being committed to have to do something that we don't know if we can perform it or not. And then you throw on top of it not being able to go bid work in the Vail Valley during the fire because of not knowing when that was going to happen. And now that shuts off another sector of the economy. So all's well at Gould Construction. It was a bummer year, but you know, you always wonder which sector you should be in, and the good sector in 2020 in construction was in single family residential for sure.
Right. I imagine, was there a lot of guys walking around, since you have the measuring tape, 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet?
Yeah, you know, great rods, the whole deal. Yeah.
Well, let's pivot real quick, Mr. Portman. Let's talk silver linings on that note. What's working for you now that you weren't doing before? I can tell you, in the restaurant industry, there were a lot of things that we had on the back burner. For instance, reservations. We didn't take reservations. All of a sudden, had time on our hands, so we were able to work on a reservation system, work on the tech, actually made for a better experience for the customers. So that's something we may be carrying forward. What about in the banking world?
Yeah. Mike, I thought about this a lot, and there's a number of things I could list, but I'd share a couple. Number one, I think and this could expand to our community and whatever subset it is, but using a banking example, we learned the power of the team when we all banded together, right? And so in our space, you know, throwing out some crazy numbers, you know, our team did 13,000 PPP loans for $1 billion, in addition to $2 billion in mortgage originations, which was a 25% increase from our highest year ever. So what the team can accomplish in a short period of time, just working together in really challenging circumstances, was mind blowing. So that was one of my favorite takeaways from the year, that our potential is unlimited. On the banking front, I'd go two-prong, and both of these actually really reinforce the direction of where the industry and our company was going, which is and accelerated through PPP, through the pandemic. But it's one, basic banking transactions. Our customers want to do fewer of those in our branches and more of them through digital channels, through online and mobile banking, taking pictures of deposits, transferring money, Zelle transferring from person to person. We want to do those easily at our fingertips, in our hands. So, and we've invested. That's been one of our priorities as a company. So we reinforce that we're moving in the right direction through the pandemic. Number two, though, that we reinforce is the relationship, and the face-to-face is so important when you get a little more complex. So if you talk about starting or growing a business, buying your first home, buying your second home, commercial real estate, you name it, the power of that relationship, and then your banker being a true financial resource and a partner in your decision-making really resonated through the pandemic. So I think those were some of the silver linings. We're moving in the right direction. We believe we understand what our customers are looking for from community banks. Right. And we've got wonderful people rallied together to make that all happen. Awesome. You want me to talk on outlook of the economy, or
yeah, I mean, are you feeling positive? Are you feeling like things are moving in the right direction?
Yeah, I think this is the cool Onward 2021, right? I mean, we had a tough year, but I am optimistic, and I would just offer a couple of things. One, we live in a wonderful place. We all knew that, but through the last year, more and more people know that, whether they're coming from out of state or elsewhere in the state of Colorado. And so more and more people know what we already know, that this is an awesome place. So I agree. We're uncertain on these work from home things and how many people are going to truly be able to live here full time that came from other states around the country, but some of them will. But more than that, people know about it and they want to be here and they see what the allure is. I'd offer this too. The banking system has deposit increases of 25% from a year ago. And so what that means is there's actually a lot of this stimulus money that's sitting in cash in accounts. So as consumers, as this vaccination rollout continues, and as consumers open up with this pent-up demand to get out and eat at all our restaurants and go to the caverns and ski at sunlight and all that kind of stuff, there's money and demand for that. And I think it's going to be a positive summer for all of us here in Glenwood. So hopefully not overly optimistic, but
No,
I'd like to bring the positive energy, Mike.
absolutely. We're anticipating a good summer, you know, in the restaurants and this and that. And Lisa,
Yeah,
are
I'm
people
gonna
gonna
jump
come
right
spend-
in.
Are they going to come and spend that cash that Dave's talking about?
I think they're going to come and spend that cash. There's pent-up demand. People want to travel. People have been waiting to travel. We are getting all kinds of indications that people are ready to hit the road and the skies and come here to Glenwood Springs. One of the best silver linings we could have had through all of the pandemic and the fire is that Hanging Lake was not burned up.
Oh, yes.
And
absolutely.
we will be releasing on visitglenwood.com on our Hanging Lake page the ability to book your permit on April 1st to hike anytime after May 1st. So, you know, that's a huge silver lining for us. We've got so much potential for, the city has done their due diligence. They've expanded outdoor dining. You mentioned reservations. Many of the restaurants are taking reservations. I've always hoped that that would happen. And I think the biggest silver lining for us for 2021, and I'm going to end with this because I know we're running short of time, is that we've got the Rocky Mountaineer luxury train coming to Glenwood Springs. And they're typically running in Canada, and the Rocky Mountaineer has chosen Glenwood Springs. They've been working with us for over 2 years. We thought it wasn't going to happen until 22 or 23, but because of COVID and because of the restrictions they have in Canada, they were able to ramp up this new route, which is the first US route. It's the Rockies to the Red Rocks. It'll go from Denver to Moab with an overnight in Glenwood Springs, 4 nights a week, Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, bringing high caliber people who want to spend money in our community. And they're going to see Glenwood Springs and they're going to want to come back. So good news for us.
Well, you set them up, Lisa, and we'll knock them down, okay? We'll keep them coming back. Shiloh, give us a quick upside on the commercial down in Glenwood Springs.
You know, interestingly, I think this year has created a really big lens for people who want to invest in this area. Interestingly enough, we have a lot of opportunity zone area in our city, and there's been a lot of commercial investors who've decided that this is the place to put that money. That's been a great thing, and I've seen so many people in our area meet and exceed their own financial goals for the year. There's been so many people that have found a place to live, that have transferred, that have made transitions in their life. I mean, with all of the negative, it's really been an honor to be a part of an industry where people can invest in themselves, their families, their continued, financial health. Again, like Dave said, just across the board, it's been amazing. So the silver lining for us is that this area continues to be an area of growth. As Mark was saying, residential growth is continued. There doesn't seem to be a massive end in sight in that as of right now. Cross your fingers. And everybody seems to be on that positive note. So that seems to be the great silver lining, as people are really looking forward to the next year. So
totally. And for our entrepreneurs out there, the incentives right now to purchase your real estate, to start businesses, get with Dave, talk to him, because it's really a good time to do that type of thing. Steve, what do you got for silver linings? I know used cars are a huge surprise.
Yeah, used cars have been a huge surprise to us. We're actually seeing, and this is a silver lining for all of you, your cars are becoming worth more right now. Because of the shortages we're seeing in the new vehicle side of things. I think a couple of reasons. One is because we have a shortage of new, so used is becoming much more in demand. So those values are going up. Right. And many of you already understand this, but that's very, very rare in what we do. And I think the other reason we're seeing that is because people still need affordable transportation. I think there's been a shift a little bit away from mass transit. People are more comfortable in the environment of the space in their own car. Right. And they don't have to deal with the masks as much, and they don't have to deal with some of the other things. So I think that's shifted a little bit towards that market. So that's been really interesting for us to watch. We're very, very positive about the year in front of us. Everything that we've seen and are seeing. Dave, you mentioned it, that the savings in your bank has been going up. We're noticing that when people come in to purchase vehicles, they're putting more cash down. It used to be an automotive transaction was a very low cash down thing. Where can I get my payments? They're putting bigger and bigger amounts of cash down when they come in and work with us now, which just speaks to what they've got in their accounts. And Lisa, you hit it perfectly. There is pent up demand like crazy. People want to get out. They want to start spending some of the money. And then that combined with the stimulus, we just think that this year is going to be real positive for us. We think there's great things in store for Glenwood. And I think we should all really be excited about what lies ahead of us. Absolutely.
George, you obviously had the quickest, biggest pivot probably of everybody here. What's come out of it positive for you? I know telehealth, we had talked about that at one point.
Yep. So I wish I had a green beer. We could all raise a toast, because I think we're all very optimistic on what's going to happen. But yes, our biggest silver lining was telehealth. Telehealth was something we probably had half dozen doctors know how to perform so that patients could be seen in their home, get a quick treatment. And that was transformative in this last year, in that every specialty that we have can do telehealth. The technology is there, the connections are there. The government has got out of the way and allowed to and actually encourage payment for those services. So that is something that's going to stay. We still do telehealth in almost every clinic. Just think about the person who's at a snowstorm now. What do? You go to you get on a telehealth. So that's been the silver lining. The other silver lining we had was that we now know that we can do incident command, disaster planning. We can do a pandemic and a fire or two simultaneously. So we know that we can muster the staff to say, yeah, we're going to meet about a pandemic at 1 o'clock, and then at 2 o'clock, we'll roll into what we're going to do about the fires that are going to make us have to evacuate the hospital. So we've got a lot of confidence that we can go ahead, but I share everyone's enthusiasm and look forward to 2021.
Well, I mean, thank you for taking care of our community and, keeping us all as healthy as possible. Mark Gould, that leaves it up to you. How are you feeling? Can you give us a big positive send off?
Eventually, yeah, I don't know how I ended up being last with the least silver linings in the group. With what we do, there's always a delay. The money has to come to fruition first, oftentimes, so that budgets can get set, so that things can be engineered and then they get constructed, right? So at this point in time, 22, 23 are looking pretty good. From that standpoint, I know that engineers are all busy, and I know that public works departments across the area are working hard to determine what projects they want to attack. But I think that for me, one of the biggest silver linings as a person who's born and raised here is that it just really feels, despite what the common rhetoric often is that our community really came together during this whole thing.
100%.
I think we really need to remind ourselves of that and remind ourselves how important that was during this time, this difficult time, and continue to keep that in the back of our minds. I think that we've got a lot of policy decisions to make about affordable housing, right? I mean, we don't have affordable housing because the people that build the affordable housing can't afford to live here. So, housing is definitely going to be a thing. I am a little bit nervous, regardless of whether it's 21, 22, 23, 28, about what our workforce looks like. You heard Richard say that there's fewer labor participants. And so as we come back, are they still here? Are they still wanting to participate? Or are we going to have this particular problem, going forward? And so there's a lot of important things to discuss going forward. And the reason why I say that we need to be a community is because there are going to be some interesting conversations, and we just need to remember that we do better together. So looking forward to 22 and 23.
Well, I mean, you couldn't have said it any better, Mark. I mean, the real true thing is the way the community did come together on this. And we have some big challenges coming up, no doubt. But you're right. If we can all, get together, have these discussions, figure out ways through this, as a community, that it's nothing but upsides, and exciting times for Glenwood Springs. We live in one of the most beautiful places on earth. And we're lucky to be here. And lucky to be on this panel. And I want to thank you guys so much. Angie, I don't know if we have any time for questions. Do you want to?
I think the governor is just getting ready to hop on here in just a moment here. So
he can wait.
Take one question, or do you have any final remarks, Mike?
No, I think that was great, guys. Thank you so much. I am gonna pin all you guys down. We do a podcast, with business leaders. So I'm gonna pin you guys down for some longer discussions. So look out for that. And thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. That was really interesting and really neat way to follow up from Richard Wobbekind's presentation. Neat to see how it's really true in our community. So thank you all for participating. I do see that we have Allie on the line. Allie, is the governor ready for us? And we have Governor Polis. All right, thank you, everybody. It's
greetings.
To introduce Governor Polis. Thank you. I'll let you take the floor.
Great. Well, hello. Good to see you. So happy St. Patrick's Day, and more importantly, happy National Small Business Development Day. And I want to thank the Glenwood Springs Chamber Resort Association. I think the sponsors include First Bank, the Post Independent. Thank you for bringing Onward 2021 to our community. And we're doing it in a safe way. We're doing it virtually. It's not too long till we can all be back in person safely. Those of you who've been vaccinated are hopefully showing more able to show more confidence, but we've only gotten through about 20% of the population, and we expect that everybody who wants a vaccine will be able to get it by the end of May. It's really been a great pleasure to work with business leaders in Western Colorado and to really be able to do our best, sort of showcasing how we can achieve our goals, especially for our mountain towns, and do tourism in a safe way. And of course, location independent employment in a safe way. And I think there's been, I understand your housing markets are pretty hot, and that's because they're wonderful places to live. And as folks realize that they don't have to live in New York or LA or Denver to do their job, it turns out many of them want to live in a place like Glenwood. Are you all having a trouble hearing, or is that just that one person? Can you guys hear me okay? Can you not nod or?
Can you make sure that you've selected English as your language at the bottom of the screen?
Me or the other person?
You'll need to select English. I think that's maybe what's happening.
Estoy hablando español con mis amigos en Glenwood Springs. Oh, that was Spanish. I'm sorry. I'll choose English.
We have interpretation happening simultaneously.
English. Okay. Is this better? Is this loud?
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know whether you heard what I said, but I was just saying we have, of course, a bit of a housing boom in Western Colorado, really around a lot of folks in, LA, New York, Texas, who realize if they can work from anywhere, why wouldn't you want to work from beautiful Western Colorado? And of course, from Denver as well. So location independent employment, doing tourism in a safe way. I'm excited that our economies are really primed to come back. And I want to ensure we can get more folks up to Glenwood, really benefit from the community. Many parts of the Colorado economy are recovering. Obviously, tourism is one of those. I think that we're in for a very strong year in tourism as the pandemic ends. Why? Because I think families across the country and across the world have cabin fever. They're ready to go somewhere. Many of them have the resources. They just got $1,400 more from the federal government, $2,800 if they're a family of two, with kids even more, $3,000, $4,000. Obviously, some folks needed it because they might have been out of work. But for many folks who had stable jobs, that's all recreational money. And they probably canceled a lot of their travel plans the last year. So we've encouraged them, of course, to recreate in Colorado, especially Denver residents, Colorado Springs residents. We said, you might be scheduled to go to Europe or whatever, and you can't go to Europe or Asia. So instead go to Glenwood or Aspen or Grand County or any of the beautiful places in Colorado. But I think that Colorado is particularly well poised for the recovery in hospitality and tourism. And of course, we're already doing tourism. We've done it safely through this winter. We're going to do it safely through summer. A lot of our tourism and our draws are outdoors, which are also people will have a higher degree of confidence in doing those. And we know that necessity yields invention, and our mountain towns and the Roaring Fork Valley communities have led the way. Lift ticket reservations and increasing confidence of skiers and boarders, businesses working closely with OEDIT and taking advantage of paycheck protection programs, some of the state programs. I'm also excited the Colorado Tourism Office got $2.4 million. I think we were one of the first state tourism offices to get money to start restoring and marketing tourism, already granted. And most of these grants is dedicated to working with partners, and that's working with 32 destinations, 20 industry associations, customized recovery strategies. I think there's over $1 million going out for direct support to tourism partners to implement those strategies. And we also now are beginning to market for out of state. We just gave the approval recently to begin attracting out of state visitors for people visiting our state beginning Memorial Day weekend, the official start of summer tourism season. We've been focused on in-state tourism. We obviously had people out of state through this whole crisis, but we were focused on how do we market to, Denver, Colorado Springs, Fort Collins, Boulder residents who had to cancel their, Europe or Asia plans or South America plans, and why not go to beautiful Western Colorado. Now we're out there we're going to be out there in the national market again. I don't think it's ready for the international market. A lot of countries have travel restrictions coming to America, but hopefully that'll be soon. But at least the national market, we are re-entered. We gave the go-ahead to re-enter the national market through the Colorado Tourism Office. And the Glenwood Springs community and destinations are really going to be great partners for the state in a recovery. And we're excited that visitors will be able to continue to enjoy our iconic natural sites like Hanging Lake, which we were able to protect, thank goodness, and really leave with a very positive association with our great state of Colorado. We're making rapid progress on vaccines. As of this Friday, in time for this weekend, everybody 50 and up in our state is eligible to get vaccinated, along with restaurant workers, essential workers, so many others. And it'll open up to everybody by the middle of April, not too far away. And everybody will be able to get it by the end of May. Remember, it opens up, but that means, you could get it tomorrow, your wait could be a month, but you'll get it within that kind of month and a half period if you're under 50 and healthy. It opens up to people 50 and up, but also anybody who's under 50 with a pre-existing condition can also get it started this weekend. So that's very exciting. We know for a fact that controlling the virus is the key to economic growth. When our numbers are low, we have more tourists come and people feel safe here. And unfortunately, we had a brush with high numbers in December, and that was reflected in how well our economy did. And I think we just have to keep up the work that we've done, wearing masks, keeping a distance where possible. And, and Garfield County is continuing to make great progress. Businesses many of them are functioning at kind of some of the less restrictive levels. And we know that vaccines are rapidly protecting more Coloradans. So Garfield County, over 24,000 doses. That's about 40% of the population that's had at least one. They're not all immune yet. Some of them just had one, but we're up to 40%, which is great. And most importantly, people 70 and up. We now have 77% of people 70 and up that have gotten at least one dose. Many of them have already received two. We're rapidly expecting Johnson single dose vaccines in the state. All good news, all good news. We're still on track to open up eligibility to everybody by early to mid-April. And we're opening up the state-run community vaccination sites in Grand Junction, in the Denver metro area, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, kind of the population centers, and continuing to work with Mesa County at the Mesa County Fairgrounds to scale it up. It's already been operating, as well as the others. And then we're also working with Garfield County and other counties on, I don't know why my volume's going up and down. I don't know. I hope you can hear me. I'll just talk louder, but I'll end soon. But we're doing equity clinics across the state as well, going into medically underserved communities, partnering with community organizations, community health clinics to get it out in Glenwood Springs, veterans and military families, Mountain Family Health Center, Community Builders, Rural Recovery Planning Initiative. Those are some of the grants from the COVID Relief Fund. And we're continuing to do that work. We're also working on a state stimulus with the state legislature. You'll be happy to know we're hoping to include in that additional sales tax relief for restaurants where they can hold on to their sales tax for 3 more months over the summer to recover robustly from this, and many other great programs, roads, infrastructure, shovel-ready projects to get Colorado back to work, as well as you'll be very interested in knowing fire mitigation, reduction, and preparation money, because we know that the wildfire recovery is still very much top of mind in many of our western counties in northern Colorado that suffered from unprecedented, the 3 largest wildfires in the history of our entire state. So there's a lot of good happening. We're working with the legislature to help small businesses, revitalize main streets and downtowns, improve our state parks and water infrastructure and schools, and expand broadband to every corner of the state. And we're just beginning to, yesterday, Vice President Kamala Harris was in town. They're touting the work on the American Rescue Plan. And in addition to the direct aid, the $1,400 to help for restaurants, the PPP, we're also beginning a listening session around the state aid piece, because on the heels of the greatest recession that we've experienced since 2008, we want to not just get back to where we were and normal, but we want to reimagine an even better future, a more prosperous future. And as we receive and administer more vaccines, I'm optimistic that we'll begin to work on to really build back in a stronger way and have a strong period of economic growth. Thank you for your continued leadership. I look forward to seeing you soon in person. In the meantime, working with all of you to propel the Western Slope to new heights and really make lasting changes we can all take to the bank. So thank you. And I'm sorry you couldn't hear me a little, Angie, but I'd be happy to answer a few questions if you'd like.
Thank you so much, Governor Polis. Does anybody have any questions? If you'd like to type them in real quick to the chat or the Q&A, we will get to as many as we can in the next few minutes. Let's see, here's a question. The Garfield County Board of Commissioners recently sent a letter asking for Garfield County to be reopened and COVID restrictions lifted based on improved numbers. Can you speak to that at all?
I don't have the letter in front of me. Obviously, the whole state is open. I assume by, I'm not sure exactly what they mean by open, because everything is open. Maybe they want to pack people in a little bit more at nightclubs or something. That's all the way it's moving. So, you know, and obviously there's a way that they can get, you know, under the current way we do it, a variance. So that if they're interested in having more capacity in nightclubs or something, they can get a variance to do that. Obviously, there's other parts of the economy where they want to make sure that whatever the Garfield does, that it doesn't lead back to higher rates and problems. So they have to balance that, but we trust our local partners. We're kind of moving in the direction of formally devolving that authority back to the, you know, the counties and the cities. And that's very much the way it's going.
Any other questions? Can you speak to the dial and the direction that's going to be going in moving forward? Will we continue to have the dial? What does that look like?
Yeah, so there's just one more incarnation of the dial will come out next week, and then it should go away by mid-April, so about a month from now. Meaning it'll be there, but it'll just be optional guidance for folks, you know, for counties, and they can custom take what they want and not take what they want. I expect that by sometime in April, barring the unpredictable, right? You never know if there's a variant that takes off or something that's terrible, but based on what we know today, you'll get to see an update next week, and then that's the beginning of it, the phase out of it, and then going to more local control.
Thank you. And another related question, when might the public health order be lifted?
Well, I think, I'm not sure if that's the same question or a different question, because I think what they're talking about there is the dial. That's the public health order says CDPHE, you make a dial, and then the dial is from CDPHE. So I think it's the same question. It's basically, it will be updated next week, and then assuming that we're doing fine, you can expect that that'll become sort of optional, fully optional for everybody, you know, sometime in April.
Thank you. Can you comment on the general condition of the education system through the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, our focus has been getting kids back to in-person education, and we've succeeded by and large in our state. I have other governors calling me up and they say, "How did you get your kids back to school?" Because they haven't been able to do that yet, at least in their cities. Every school pretty much is back. The K-8 are all back pretty much full time. Some of the high schools are in 2 days, which is certainly better than 0 days. And they're not all back 4 days or 5 days yet. Some are, of course, but some of them. But basically, they're back, which is great because the kids need it. How did we do it? This is what I tell my fellow governors. I said, in some ways, you're calling me, 3 or 4 months too late, because this was work that began last year, where we got a back to school task force. We brought parents and superintendents and teachers and health officials together. We said, what do we need to be able to be back? We sent free masks to every teacher from the start of the year, testing, layered protections like symptom checking, and a number of things to help people be safe. Obviously, we've gotten through our teachers in terms of vaccination as well, but our schools were back even before that. I'm proud to say, by the way, that about 90% of Colorado's teachers got vaccinated. That was even higher than we thought. We thought it would be about 80%. Teachers are smart. They have college degrees. They knew they wanted to be protected. And I don't know if any other demographic group will match that. 90% of the teachers got vaccinated, which is just wonderful and bodes well for the state. So, and that was part of it too. But I do want to point out we got our schools back before that even kicked in, and we saw very little transmission. So it's just getting the science and data out there. Schools are not zero risk, nothing is zero risk, but schools are relatively low risk compared to many other activities that occur. And if you take the right precautions, they can be even lower risk. If you're asking about the state of education, I think next school year will be normal. I really do. We have some catch-up work for kids. So a lot of the stimulus funding, the one-time funding that school districts get, that the states get, you're going to see a lot of robust summer programs, especially for kids that normally can't afford summer programs, low-income kids, to make sure that every kid kind of gets that full year learning that they deserve this year. I'll take one more question, then I have to run.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. What's a question? Just pull out your crystal ball. What do you see? How do you see the economy 6 months from now?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm smart enough to know about the whole economy, but I see tourism and recreation is doing really well. I just think there's pent-up demand. There's money. That is a very good formula for tourism and recreation. And I just think we're going to have a blockbuster late summer season. I think really what people should be talking about is how do we sort of extend it? How do we have a good September, early October? I think the demand will be there. I really do. So I think it's going to be, and I'm glad we got some snow to extend our winter season a little bit too, which is great. So a lot of resorts are expanding, which is terrific. A few weeks. I think it'll be very good summer season and fall season, I should say. It's fun to say the words fall season because we usually don't have much of one, but I think if we play it right, we can have a fall season.
Thank you, Governor. We really appreciate you being here today, and it's certainly a silver lining of the pandemic to be able to have conversations like this, even across the continental divide. So thank you.
Gracias por la oportunidad para conversar con ustedes. Whoops, I must have put it on Spanish. Okay, thank you all very much. I'll see you soon in person.
All right, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you to Richard Wobbekind, our keynote, to our business panel for your great insight in what's happening in our local economy. Thanks to Governor Polis for joining us. And thank you to our sponsors, First Bank and the Glenwood Springs Post-Independent. And also want to thank our interpreters from Global Language Services who have been working hard throughout this entire presentation to make sure that it's available in Spanish as well. So happy St. Patrick's Day. We really encourage all of you to go out and visit our local restaurants this evening if you can. Many of them have specials, and hope you can go say hello. So this concludes our presentation. Thank you so much. Onward 2021.
Thanks, Angie.